camera. Hey guys, so we've just walked into this room and we found a really large ritual pentagram on the floor.
One of my favourite locations for a horror movie is an asylum, a psychiatric hospital, something along the lines of that. John Webster writes and directs Night Explorers, The Asylum, a 2023 movie that takes this concept of a kind of most haunted style reality TV show going to explore various haunted locations, and this time they've got permission to go and explore this asylum which has been cited for demolition. So they're going to be the last people to actually kind of have a look around this building. And it was actually filmed in an abbey in Lincolnshire, I believe. So they have quite a large crew of people and then go to explore, hoping to find some evidence of supernatural, but if they can't, they may well tweak a few things and make a few things happen. However, when they get into this abandoned asylum, they may get more than they expected. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So before I go any further, I should say this is going to have some slight spoilers in this review. I have to really mention a few things because without mentioning it, it's impossible really to discuss this movie in a kind of critical fashion. I'm going to avoid giving away anything I can help, but there's a reveal that happens about a third of the way through the movie, which fundamentally kind of we have to talk about if we're going to be able to talk about this movie. But it is a relatively early reveal, and the movie's not trying to kind of bury the lead or anything like that, but just so you know. Now, one of my favourite kind of horror movies of recent years has been Grave Encounters, which was a found footage movie that actually had a similar concept, a group of documentary filmmakers going into film paranormal events in this asylum. This movie is not a found footage movie. It is a traditionally filmed movie, although it has that very similar setup. So, what is the kind of the reveal that I'm talking about here? And last chance, we're going to talk mild spoilers here. So the threat here is not actually supernatural, but it is actually a group of homeless people that are living in this asylum that don't take kindly to people coming in. Now, this movie ends up being a little bit more like The Hills Have Eyes than like Grave Encounters. It's more of a slasher movie, although it appears from the kind of the onset that it's going to be more of a paranormal movie. Now, was this a wise decision? I don't think it probably was, because I would imagine most people assume that this is going to be some type of ghostly supernatural affair, and it really isn't. It hints that there might well be a supernatural presence there as well, but it doesn't really factor into the actual plot, so to speak. Okay, let's discuss. Let's break it down and let's talk about what works and what doesn't. So let's talk about what works first of all. I actually quite like the idea that this group is quite large. We have, I don't know how many exactly people there were, but they looked around 8 or 9 people. And as such, you have a good amount of you know, people splitting off into little kind of like different teams, so you can concentrate on different people in different parts of this kind of like, you know, asylum. It also means you've got a relatively kind of high body count when kind of things start to happen. So I actually kind of quite like the fact that this is quite a large group, and it actually consists of 2 different sorts of ghost hunters, I suppose, 2 groups of them coming together because they've had to pay quite a lot of money to get into this kind of asylum. And let's talk about this asylum. As I've said, it was actually filmed in an abbey in Lincolnshire, and it's a great location, and I actually think there have been genuine sort of paranormal investigations that have got on in this place. So, you know, it does look the part, you might say. It's a kind of a large Gothic building. I think it's very effective for a kind of a movie like this. And I will say the movie is shot relatively well. So in a film like this, sometimes you can suffer from obviously low light, can't really see what's kind of going on. And although this movie primarily does take place in kind of the night and in a kind of an old building, they do manage to sort of light it, you know, well enough where you can see more or less what's happened, but don't overlit it. So it's, you know, too kind of like illuminated and stuff, and it still has a sort of a creepy kind of like visual presence to it, which I think was good. So there's things like that I think were done pretty well, and the movie is sort of competently put together on a kind of a technical scale here. I think the idea of having these homeless people as more of a slasher idea, it has some interesting kind of elements to it. There is a sort of suggestion that they are some cultists or some type of demonic worshippers and things. It's also a suggestion that they are ex-patients of this kind of, you know, when it was a functioning kind of asylum, or they could just be homeless people. So there's a kind of a few options here that we're kind of given, or it could be all, you know, or a number of them. So I kind of quite like the idea that there's these sort of destitute people, you know, vagrants there, and they are violent, they're kind of crazed for whatever reason, they are wanting to get a particular kind of result in regards to these demonic kind of worshippings and things. So, you know, there's some kind of good stuff sort of set up there, I would say. And I think the movie's relatively kind of like well paced. Again, because we have a large amount of cast, we have a big building, we have a variety of different sort of antagonists, and there is a hint of a supernatural element as well. You know, it's relatively well paced because there's a fair amount kind of going on, and there's a few kind of like fake outs and stuff. So I actually think the movie had a fairly consistent level of kind of things happening on screen to make it like, so it's not a boring film at least. Okay, so let's discuss what does not work. So, I think the acting, I have to be honest with you, isn't the greatest. Now, I will say I don't think the acting is terrible, but it's noticeable enough where it kind of seems clunky and a little bit awkward at times. Now, you could argue that had this been like a found footage movie, you might get away with it because these people are, you know, they're playing to the camera and all of this kind of stuff. But it isn't a found footage movie, it's a traditionally shot movie. And as such, I think it notices a little more. I wonder if this movie would have been better suited for a kind of found footage format rather than what we actually have got. Now, I think the problem here is obviously the expectations are going to be subverted. I would suggest that most people are probably going to go into this wanting to watch a kind of ghost story, and what we get is killer tramps. And I don't know if people might not be that satisfied with that. It doesn't seem quite as interesting, to be honest with you. At least for some. I mean, some might be more slasher fans, but then would they be attracted to this? If you're a slasher fan and you don't really like paranormal kind of movies, you might not want to even bother watching this because you think it's a paranormal movie. So there's something to be said for, you know, subverting one's expectations and giving the people what they want, what they paid for, what they wanted to get from this movie. And I don't know if the movie really does that. Also, I have to say, I think the motivations here for these kind of vagrants, this group of vagrants, is a little mixed. I mean, we're introduced to the fact that there is some type of satanic ritual going on. But it's not ever clear about what they intend to do. How did they get into this? You know, who is the kind of, what's leading them? What is their end game? And then it's kind of suggested that they're actually ex-patients. Well, in that case, well, how have they been just left there because the building's in quite a state of disrepair as we see it in the film. So how have they been there for that long? How were they left there if they are patients? You know, and like surely there would have been other people. I mean, we're led to believe that this building has been cited for demolition. And you would have thought that there would have been people doing surveys, and the people who own the building and all the land and stuff would at least have been visiting it, in which case they probably would have come across these sort of people. So it kind of doesn't really make sense. Or if they're just random homeless people, actually ends up being the kind of probably the most logical thing, but it seems the one that's not really what they're leaning to at all, to be honest. So, you know, there's a few logic problems here, and even some of the smaller details. Like when we first go into this asylum, before like anything happens, like one of the guys doing this filming goes, "Oh, there's only one exit in this building." I'm thinking, one exit in a building that size? I don't think so. Like you know, if it's a functioning asylum that had only sort of, I mean, it wouldn't have been that long ago. If these people are ex-patients, there would have been fire exits at the very least. So it's kind of like, come on, you know. So I think some of the attention to sort of detail here is I don't know. It's just like sort of skipped over. Don't worry too much about logic. We can just kind of like. The other thing I would say with this movie is, despite being shot in a really cool location that doubled for this asylum, the filmmakers here failed to make it particularly creepy. This is a great opportunity, this movie, to have this creepy dread that's kind of like in the dark. We don't know what's out there. There's something creeping up. There's something watching you from the shadows. And it doesn't really ever get that eerie. It's partially because it has this kind of upbeat soundtrack. I mean, the music isn't bad, I'm not saying that, but it doesn't fit the film. Partly because there's constantly people talking in this movie, because we have quite a large cast. They're all sort of youngsters who are sort of, you know, bantering and all that. And just the way it's shot with kind of more quick edits and stuff, you never really feel like the darkness is like a character in itself. So it fails in really creating a kind of a tangible, creepy atmosphere, even though I think the actual, you know, building that it's shot in would definitely have accommodated that. Technically it's well shot, it just doesn't have the atmosphere. So overall, it's a little bit of a disappointing movie, I would suggest, and it ends up being a little kind of like lackluster. And I have to say, the direction they went in would have been fine had they had a little bit more context in it. Because it really doesn't. I mean, even there's, some of these tramps, there's a few like confrontations, and at one point they seem to be like hard to kill. And I'm thinking, well, why is that? Is it just, it's never addressed. Is it some demonic power? Is it they're on drugs? Or is it they're just like well-hard or something? Who knows? It's just an okay movie, really. Unfortunately, some of the critiques just pip it under a below-average film for me, but it's not a terrible film. I would suggest watching it more if you're a slasher fan than if you are a, you know, paranormal fan. So it's a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.